Dennis Nilsen.
And the guard hauled the body out onto the floorboards, put it on the sheet, and then come out.
Dennis Nilsen, often referred to on social media as British Dahmer, was born in Scotland on December 23, 1945. And just like Jeffrey Dahmer, Dennis was a serial killer and a cannibal, just based in London. The tales of Dennis's atrocities began in 1974, when he lured a 14-year-old boy to his apartment for a couple of drinks. The young boy and Dennis both slept after having those drinks. But when Dennis woke up in the morning, he didn't want the boy to leave, so he made him stay, and by that, I mean, he killed him. From there, Dennis went on to kill many more teenage boys by luring them into his apartment. And after killing them, he would perform some depraved acts of masturbation on their corpses, sleep next to them, or even lay next to them while he watched TV. Dennis revealed that the reason for this psychotic behavior of his was to satisfy his loneliness and sexual urges. It was revealed that after he had murdered these boys, he'd keep their bodies beneath the wooden floor of his apartment. And if he ever missed them, he'd carry up the semi-rotten corpse and lay next to it. We find Dennis's case describing a man with extreme loneliness, but it doesn't justify the sadistic things done to those innocent kids. And it wasn't until 1981 that his evil deeds began catching up with him. October 1981, he left his old apartment behind. But first, he exhumed all the bodies beneath his wooden floor and burned them in the woods behind his apartment. To conceal the smell of burning flesh, he threw a tire into the fire, and that might have been effective in some sense. But at the same time, the things he did in his new apartment weren't so smart. At his new apartment, Dennis continued murdering young boys, but this time there was no place to hide their bodies. So he dismembered them and stocked their body parts in plastic bags. At the same time, during the process of dismembering these bodies, a few chunks of flesh and bones got wasted, and Dennis tried flushing and sticking them down the drain. Doing this almost repeatedly blocked the drainage system of the entire apartment complex. Neighbors began complaining, and when plumbers were called to come check out this issue, human body parts were found. Then the police got involved, and it wasn't long before the evidence was traced down to Dennis's apartment. He was arrested, charged to court, and given a life sentence. But after battling health problems while in prison, Dennis ended up dying in 2018 at the age of 72.
All gone. Everything's gone. There is nothing left. But I still feel a spiritual communion with these people.
Number 3. Anthony Kirkland.
And I am responsible for the death of those 4 young ladies. I do not even know why I did it.
Anthony Kirkland is referred to as an American monster, and you'll find out why in a minute. He was born in Fort Campbell, Kentucky on September 13, 1968. Shortly after he was born, he moved with his parents to Cincinnati, Ohio, where he spent the most part of his life. But in this very same town, Anthony Kirkland will end up killing and molesting at least 4 underage girls. And even before that, Anthony will kill his girlfriend, Leola Douglas, back when he was just 21 years old. She refused to have sex with him, so he raped, killed, and set her body on fire to conceal evidence of the crime. Kirkland pleaded guilty to voluntary manslaughter and was sentenced to 10 to 25 years in prison. But after 18 years, he was released, and that's when the real trouble began. Kirkland was called a monster because of his lack of self-control. Between 1998 and 2003, he was placed in solitary confinement 21 times for disciplinary control. And in the last 9 months of his time in prison, he was sent to solitary 4 times for breaking the rules or fighting other inmates. We all know what solitary confinement does to people, and for a man like Kirkland, it made him lose his mind. He went on a sexual abuse spree, killing 4 ladies between May 4th, 2006 and March 7th, 2009. And amongst the 4 ladies, 2 of them were minors. He would rape, kill, and burn the bodies of his victims to hide the evidence. But after killing his 4th victim, Esme Kenny, Kirkland was arrested near the scene because he was in possession of her watch and an iPod. But on August 28, 2018, a Hamilton County judge agreed with the jury's recommendation and sentenced Kirkland to death. As of right now, he's on death row at the Chillicothe Correctional Institution. Number 2. Robert Black.
I'd be driving along, I'd see a young girl. I'd get out and talk to her and try to persuade her to get into the van. And take her somewhere quiet.
1963. A man named Robert Black kidnapped a Scottish 7-year-old girl whom he took to his house and sexually abused. By the time the girl was unconscious, he had held her by the neck and masturbated all over her body. He was charged with lewd behavior and didn't even get any jail time for this. He was only subjected to a few therapy sessions before they let him go. And letting a man like Robert Black go was probably the worst mistake ever made. Robert Black was in Scotland on April 21, 1947, and was involved in the molestation and murder of 4 girls between the ages of 5 and 16. After his first run-in with the police in 1963, 2 of his neighbors complained about him inappropriately touching their children. He was sent to a rehabilitation center for 6 months, but that didn't help as well. Robert then began watching illicit content of children, and his disgusting obsession with underage girls grew stronger. And on August 12, 1981, he kidnapped a little girl, molested, killed, and dumped her body where no one would find it. Robert Black continued molesting and killing these minors until one day he tried adopting a little girl known as Teresa Thornhill. While Robert was driving around the neighborhood in his vehicle, he spotted Teresa and invited her into his murder van. But while she was getting in, a neighbor, David Herkes, saw her get in and suspected that she was being kidnapped. He then calls the police and describes what the van looks like, launching a search for the vehicle. But then out of nowhere, David Herkes spotted the van once again around the neighborhood, making him direct the cops to where it was parked. When the police forced Robert to open the van, they found Teresa tied up and gagged in a sleeping bag. He had already molested her with his fingers, and he was looking for a good location to end her life and drop off the body before he was found.
Happy that I've survived the tale, but then I look back and think about the poor girls that haven't survived, and I sometimes feel so guilty.
Robert Black was charged to court and sentenced to life imprisonment, but he died of a heart attack in 2016, and David Herkes, the man who spotted Teresa in the van, will forever be known as the best neighbor. And number 1, Javed Iqbal. Born in Lahore, Pakistan on October 8, 1956, Javed was a child serial killer in his home country. Javed's father was a businessman, and he wasn't doing bad for himself either, but along the line, a dark side of him developed, making him murder at least 100 Pakistani boys in Lahore. And the twist to his story is that he ended up reporting himself to the police and to a journalist. He wrote a detailed report to this media journalist talking about how he met these boys and how he also murdered them. Of course, now we can't go into the disturbing details here, but in summary, he targeted young boys between the ages of 6 and 16 who were orphans or just hungry children lurking in the streets. Then he would take care of them before dismembering their bodies and killing them. He said he committed these acts as a form of retaliation for what the police did to him and his family. He claimed to have been arrested on charges of sodomy, and on hearing the news, his mom had a heart attack. So as a form of retaliation, he said he would make over 100 mothers feel pain, the same way his mother felt it. In November 1999, Pakistan launched a nationwide manhunt for Iqbal, and a month later, he turned himself in to the authorities. He was sentenced to death by hanging. The judge added that his body should be cut into 100 parts and dissolved in acid, the same thing he did to those poor boys. However, Iqbal ended up committing suicide in his prison cell before his execution.